Welcome to the House of European History, a museum located in Brussels, where you can explore the way history shaped a sense of European memory and how it continues to influence our lives today. I am now standing in front of the Vortex of History, a 25-meter-high metal installation spanning across the 6 floors of the museum. It was designed by Boris Mika and Todo Muta Studio in Spain and connects the topics and events the exhibition covers. This remarkable piece of scenography evokes the dynamism of history and its ever-changing interpretations. When the branches of the vortex stretch out into the exhibition spaces, the letters merge into quotations in various languages. As you can start to realize, languages are at the core of the experience of the visitor at the House of European History.
Now let's explore together the museum's permanent exhibition through the angle of linguistic diversity. Europe is, and has always been, an incredibly diverse place. There are 143 languages that evolved on the continent, complemented by more than 250 immigrant languages. These are an expression of the richness of Europe's diverse cultural heritage. Think about translations. When Europeans meet, the number of possible language combinations is immense. Multilingualism is also at the heart of the House of European History, as visitors can explore the museum's permanent exhibition in 24 different languages, thus opening up its content to a wide range of audiences.
The Myth of Europa, which our permanent exhibition begins with, is an interesting example of cultural transfer in ancient times. It illustrates the origin not only of the continent's name, but also of the European alphabets. In the myth, Europa is described as a princess with a demigoddess status, daughter of King Agenor of Tyre in Phoenicia. Thus, the king of gods falls in love with the princess and takes on the form of a beautiful white bull to seduce her and kidnap her. He swims off with her across the Mediterranean Sea, away from Asia to the island of Crete. Meanwhile, King Agenor sends out his sons in search for their abducted sister. One of them, Cadmus, brings with him his knowledge of the Phoenician alphabet to the Greek world, leading to the development of the Greek alphabet, the basis of all European alphabets. We know the story of Europa and Cadmus from the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote his histories in the 5th century before Common Era. These Phoenicians who came with Cadmus brought with them to Hellas, among many other kinds of learning, the alphabet, which had been unknown before this, I think, to the Greeks.
We are now a few floors up in the exhibition, in the middle of Europe's 20th century. On my left is one of the first milestones of European integration, one of the many pillar showcases that run through the exhibition to highlight the history of European integration after 1945. Under the momentum of Robert Schumann's declaration on the 9th of May 1950, 6 countries, Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg and the Netherlands, reached agreement and created the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. This marks the starting point of the European integration process. Many key steps will follow, many more countries will join, and therefore more languages will become part of this process. Take a look at the spelling of Europe on this iron ingot from 1953. It omits the final letter E, as spelled in French, and A, as seen in German, Dutch, and Italian. Why is the word Europe written like that? Because language is a powerful way to illustrate the compromise at the heart of the new European coal and steel community.
In this section of the exhibition, we present the Europeanization processes of the 1990s and the first 2 decades of the 2000s that have made Europeans and European countries grow together in many different respects. At the same time, through enlargements and migration movements, diversity has been growing over time in Europe. One of the most palpable expressions of that is precisely the way multilingualism works in practice across European people. I am now standing in front of a wall of bilingual dictionaries, a sample of the many language combinations possible among official languages but also minority ones. Translation, says the writer Umberto Eco, is the language of Europe. Here at the House of European History, we exhibit in this section the work of our colleagues, interpreters and translators, who are really the craftsmen and women of this linguistic diversity within the institutions of the European Union. Here, we can see an example of interpretation equipment for 6 languages, dating from after the enlargement of 1973. Following the enlargement of 2013, the 24 official languages gave rise to 552 possible interpretation combinations. Words are the tools of interpreters and translators. This means not only seeking the correct terminology for the subject matter in hand, but also keeping in touch with the way European languages are constantly evolving, creating new words and expressions. Here you can see a multilingual dictionary of new words from the European Parliament dating from 2013. But this showcase and this section do not only present recent objects and documents, since linguistic diversity has been a defining feature of Europe since ancient times, as we saw, and throughout its history.
In spite of its wealth of languages, Europe is not the most linguistically diverse of all continents, as it features only 2.2% of the world's languages. What is unique to Europe, however, is the way languages have been standardized for centuries. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century meant that Latin was overtaken by vernacular languages. In this showcase, we can see a dictionary from the 16th century found in Venice, which is part of the museum's collection. What is special about it is that it covers 5 different languages: Latin, Italian, Croatian, German, and Hungarian. Of course, linguistic diversity and multilingualism do not mean that there is not one language more widely spoken throughout Europe. English has already become the common European language, but it hasn't always been the case. Latin, Greek, and Church Slavonic were once Europe's lingua francas, enabling people of different languages to communicate with each other. French would later become the language of diplomacy. In the later 20th century, in Eastern Europe, people were mostly studying Russian. Take a look at 2 examples of manuals for learning Russian, one from Hungary and the other from East Germany. Could the European Constitution be rewritten in poetry? Following extensive debates about the European Union Constitution, Belgian poets David van Rooiproek and Pieter Vermeersch wanted to see if they could come up with an alternative version. They worked together with more than 50 poets all around Europe on a constitution written by citizens themselves. Individual voices from all the corners of the continent speak about their common heritage in contrasting ways. Take a look at this digital installation, which shows fragments from the book The European Constitution in Verse, published in 2011. These unique contemporary verses voice concerns and hopes in more than 30 different languages.
Thank you to all those who joined us today for these snapshots of languages and linguistic diversity in the history of Europe.
If you are in Brussels, come and visit the museum. Otherwise, follow us on social media, where we share news about our upcoming events and exhibitions.